Welcome to the Tradonics Rules Overview. These are the basic rules to trading the Tradonics system. There are 7 basic steps to this. Number 1 is establish the trend. Next, we're going to verify the trend. We're going to wait for a pullback. Then we're going to enter on a signal. We're going to place a stop loss. Then we're going to place a take profit. And then we're going to trail the stop as the trade progresses. Number 1, establish the trend. If the TBL indicator is red, the trend is down. If the TBL indicator is green, the trend is up. On the image, you can see where the TBL indicator is red or green. When the TBL turns red, we are looking for short trades. When the TBL turns green, we are looking for long trades. It's important to note at this point that when the TBL turns red, we don't automatically take a trade. When the TBL turns green, that's not a trade signal. We're not looking to take a trade when the TBL switches from one color to the next. What the TBL does is tell us what direction to be looking for trades. So once the TBL turns red, at that point, we're going to start looking for short trades to take. Once the TBL turns green, we're going to start looking for opportunities to go long. Number 2, verify the trend. Wait for the first candle that has every indicator on the correct side of the price to confirm the trend. Once the TBL is green, the trend is up. We wait until the first candle appears that closes, that has the switch pointing up, has the TBS under the price, and has the TBM under the price. This will be represented by a big green tetragram bar. Once the TBL is red, the trend is down. We wait until the first candle appears that closes and has the switch pointing down, has the TBS above the price, and has the TBM above the price. This will be represented by a big red tetragram bar. All of this can happen on the same candle as soon as the TBL changes direction, and often does. So on the image, what we're looking at is as soon as the TBL turns down, turns red, the trend changes direction. We also have the switch turning red, pointing down. We have the TBS over top of the price, and we have the TBM dots over top of the price. All of that together means that what we're going to get on the tetragram is a big red tetragram bar, and this validates that the trend is officially down. When the TBL turns green, also, we have the switch underneath the price pointing up. We have the TBS underneath the price turned green, and we have the TBM underneath the price also turned green. At this point, we have the TBL, the TBS, the TBM, and the switch all in agreement, and at that point, the trend is officially up. This is validation or confirmation of the uptrend. Number 3, wait for a pullback. Once the trend has been verified, we wait for one or more of the non-TBL indicators to change color. In an uptrend, we want one or more of the switch, the TBS, or the TBM to turn down. The switch will have a red arrow appear, the TBS and or the TBM would turn red. In a downtrend, we want one or more of the switch, TBS, or the TBM to turn up. The switch will have a blue arrow appear, the TBS and or the TBM would turn green. On the image, what we're seeing is a tetragram bar that represents change in direction. The TBL must remain the same color. This is why we're referring to non-TBL indicators. The TBS, the TBM, and the switch are non-TBL indicators. One of them has to pull back. 2 of them can pull back, or all 3 of them can pull back. When I say pull back, I mean come back in the opposite direction far enough to create an alternate signal. When the price pulls back far enough, the TBS might drop below the price and turn green. The switch might pop down below the indicator and have a blue arrow pointing up. The TBM might drop below and turn green. This is in a downtrend. In a downtrend, we want to see the opposite colors. In an uptrend, once the trend is up, the TBL must remain up. But in order to get a pullback, we must have a red switch appear or have a TBL or a TBM turn red. We must have one of these indicators go in the opposite direction. On the tetragram, it's most often going to be represented by a gray tetragram bar. Once in a while, we'll get a short colored bar. Usually it's going to be a gray tetragram bar. Number 4, we're going to enter on a signal. Now we wait for the trend to resume and enter a trade on the candle that closes to change the indicators back in the trend direction. If only one indicator turned the opposite color or direction, then we wait for it to turn back again to have all the indicators in the right direction. If more than one indicator turned the opposite color or direction, we wait for them to all turn back for a conservative entry, or we wait for 3 of the 4 to turn back for an aggressive entry. The switch must always turn back along with one other indicator, the TBS or the TBM, for the aggressive entry. We are going to cover this in another video. The aggressive entry as the tetragram bar turns to a small red bar. So we have the pullback as it had turned gray. And then as we get 3 of the 4 indicators turning into the proper direction, we are going to get this represented on the tetragram by a small red bar. Now on the green or the long side, when we move over, we're looking at a conservative entry as the tetragram bar turns to a big green. When we get a big green tetragram bar, every single indicator has turned into the right direction. That means that initially with the pullback, we've had 1 or 2 indicators or 3 indicators change direction. And now with a conservative signal or a big green tetragram bar, the switch has turned back underneath the price, turned blue, pointing up. The TBS is back underneath the price, and the TBM also is back underneath the price. All the indicators, all the non-TBL indicators are headed in the right direction. It now confirms that the trend is back. Number 5, place a stop loss. We will use the TBM or the TBS to place our stop loss. In a conservative entry, we have the option which one to use. We can use either the TBS or the TBM. In an aggressive entry, we will not have this option. It will be one or the other. It will be either the TBM or the TBS that we will have to use to place our initial stop loss. In both instances, we are using the TBM. Once the trade is signaled and we've entered the market, we will place our stop loss just over the TBM dot. The TBM is the stop loss placement that I highly recommend. This is a little bit safer than the TBS. It is a little bit further away from the price. We are less likely to be stopped out using the TBM. We don't want to place the stop loss directly on the TBM dot. We want to use a little bit of a gap, a little bit of a distance. We want to have that wiggle room for the price. So if the price does touch the TBM or poke through it just a little bit, then we're not going to be stopped out. We want a little bit of a space just above the TBM dot or just below the TBM dot in a long trade. Number 6, place a take profit. Now we're going to place a profit target on the trade, and often it will be a 1-to-1 reward to risk ratio. This means that if we are placing our stop loss for 25 pips, we are going to place a profit target also for 25 pips. In the image, we're looking at 2 different take profit levels. Again, these are 1-to-1 take profit levels. So if we are placing a stop loss from our initial entry, we enter the market, the initial stop loss is 30 pips away. Let's say that's the example for trade 1, the short trade. Then our take profit, being 1-to-1, is also going to be 30 pips. This is the most conservative and the most likely to be taken out take profit. This is the one that is going to get hit almost all the time. On the second trade, the long trade, we're looking at closer to a 50 pip stop loss, which means we are going to place a 1-to-1 take profit, which means a 50 pip profit target. Again, the conservative way to do this is 1-to-1. Whatever your stop loss is what you're going to place. Now, you can do different ratios. You can do 2-to-1, 1.5-to-1, 5-to-1, whatever you're comfortable with, but the 1-to-1 is the most common, and it is the one that is the most easily hit. Number 7, trail the stop loss. We are going to use the TBM to move the stop loss as the trade progresses. This is a trailing stop. As the trade moves, as the currency market starts to move in our favor, the TBM dots are going to follow the price. As the price drops in a short trade, the TBM dots will get progressively lower and lower. And for every new dot that appears, we are going to move our stop loss to just above that dot. Every time a new dot appears, we can reduce the risk on the trade. In a long trade, once we enter the market and then a new candle forms or a new candle opens, the TBM dot that appears will climb. It'll be a little bit higher than the previous dot. Once we get a TBM dot that moves a little bit higher, we can adjust our stop loss to accommodate the new TBM placement. As soon as this happens, we can reduce the risk on our trade. Most common risk on a trade is 2% of your account. When you start trailing your stop loss, you can take that 2% risk and cut it down to 1.5%. Then you can cut it down to 1%, then 0.5%. And then eventually, if your take profit hasn't been hit yet, your stop loss can be moved to your entry level or break even. So you're at no risk at all. And if the market is going well, you may even be able to move your stop loss into profit so that no matter what happens, if your take profit gets hit or your stop loss gets hit, you're going to make money. Reducing the risk on your trade is one of the most important features to any trading program.